The park was quiet that afternoon until Officer Ray barked, hands where I can see him, at a man simply feeding ducks. No crime, no reason. Just arrogance wrapped in a badge. But when the man calmly pulled out an ID, Ray's voice cracked because staring back at him wasn't a name. It was a seal he'd only seen on federal briefings. Federal Bureau of Investigation Director. And in that instant, the cop realized. The man he just humiliated could end his entire career. With one phone call, it was one of those golden afternoons in Washington, D.C., where the sun seemed to hang a little longer than usual. The park was alive with the gentle hum of laughter, joggers passing by, dogs barking near the fountain, and families spreading blankets on the grass. Among them sat a tall black man named Daniel Cole, dressed simply in a gray hoodie and dark slacks. He sat quietly on a bench by the lake, tossing breadcrumbs to ducks and sipping from his metal thermos. He wasn't there to be noticed. He was there to think, to breathe, to escape the noise of meetings, politics, and responsibility. For Daniel, the park was sacred. It was one of the few places where he could exist as just another face in the crowd, not as the director of the FBI, not as a man of authority, but as a human being who wanted peace. But fate often finds ways to test the calmest of souls. Officer Mark Lewis had just begun his patrol. He was known around the precinct for being confident, sometimes too confident. He wore his badge like a crown and his attitude like armor. As he scanned the park, his gaze fell on Daniel. Sitting alone, well-dressed, quiet, composed. Mark's mind made assumptions before his mouth even spoke. He approached Daniel, his boots crunching on gravel. "Hey," he barked. "You can't sit there." Daniel looked up slowly. "A little surprised. Is there a problem, officer?" Mark folded his arms. "You tell me? What are you doing here, just feeding the ducks?" Daniel replied calmly, holding up a small paper bag of breadcrumbs. Mark's tone sharpened. "Feeding ducks. Huh, at this hour looks suspicious to me." Daniel blinked, confused. "Suspicious? I don't understand." Mark smirked. "You people always act like you don't understand. You think this park's your personal property?" Daniel exhaled deeply, trying to stay composed. "Officer, I'm just—" "Save it," Mark cut him off. "Stand up, hands where I can see them." A couple walking nearby slowed their steps. A boy on a bike stopped pedaling. The quiet hum of the park seemed to freeze. Daniel stood up slowly, his posture steady. His voice calm, "Sir. With all due respect, you're overreacting." Mark's voice got louder. "Don't tell me what I'm doing. Show me your ID." Daniel hesitated, not out of fear but disbelief. "Did I break any law?" Mark stepped closer, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You want to find out what law you broke? Keep talking for a long moment." Daniel just stared at him, not with anger but with deep disappointment. The kind that speaks louder than shouting. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Oh yeah," Mark laughed mockingly. "You some kind of lawyer? What are you, huh?" Daniel reached slowly into his jacket. "I'm reaching for my wallet," he said clearly. Mark's hand hovered over his holster. Slowly, he warned. Daniel handed him the wallet. Calmly, Mark snatched it, flipping it open with that same arrogant smirk, but it didn't last long. The second his eyes landed on the gold seal inside, his expression changed completely. His face went pale, his throat tightened. Printed clearly on the ID card were the words, "Federal Bureau of Investigation Director Daniel A. Cole." Mark's hand trembled, his lips parted, but no words came out. He looked back up, realizing the gravity of what he had just done. You're the yes," Daniel said quietly. "I am." The silence was heavy. The joggers who had stopped were now openly staring. Someone held up a phone. A mother whispered to her child to keep walking. Daniel took back his wallet slowly. "You didn't ask what I was doing. He said you decided who I was before you even spoke to me." Mark's eyes darted around nervously. "Sir, I didn't mean you didn't mean to get caught." Daniel interrupted softly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of weight that made every word sting. "How many people have you talked to this way? How many innocent lives did you make feel small just to feel powerful?" Mark swallowed hard, unable to answer. His badge suddenly felt heavier than ever. Daniel stepped closer, close enough that Mark could see the calm fury in his eyes. "That badge," Daniel said, nodding toward it, "isn't a weapon. It's a promise to protect. You broke that promise the moment you opened your mouth." Mark's hands began to shake. "Sir, please, I didn't know who you were," Daniel's reply came like a quiet storm, and that's exactly the point. You shouldn't have to know. A long silence followed. Daniel looked around. People were watching, some with anger, some with sadness, finally. He said, "You may go. Officer Lewis, I'll handle this my way." Mark froze, realizing what that meant. He turned his face red and walked away. Each step heavier than the last. He felt every pair of eyes on his back. He knew his career might just have ended in that moment that night. Word spread quickly through the department. By morning, the story had reached the media. Officer Mark Lewis was suspended pending an internal investigation. The incident became a national conversation, not just about racism, but about how easily power turns into arrogance when unchecked. But for Daniel, it wasn't about headlines or revenge. The following week, he returned to the same park, the same bench, the same ducks. He sat there quietly tossing breadcrumbs into the water. This time, a small boy waved at him. Daniel smiled and waved back. For once, no one looked twice at him. He was just a man enjoying a peaceful morning. An elderly woman who often visited the park approached him with a kind smile. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "I saw what happened that day. You handled it with such grace." Daniel smiled. "Thank you, ma'am. I only did what I had to." She nodded slowly. "You gave a lesson to all of us that day." He chuckled lightly, maybe. But lessons don't mean much if people don't learn from them. She patted his shoulder gently before walking away. Daniel sat back, watching the water ripple. As the ducks swam, he whispered under his breath, "Power is only worth something when it's used with respect." Later that week, a letter was issued from the FBI office. A formal apology to the public and an announcement of new training programs for local police departments on racial bias and public conduct. Daniel made sure that incident wouldn't just end with punishment, but with purpose. The park became a little quieter after that. The air felt lighter. Officer Lewis never returned to that area again, but Daniel did almost every Saturday. Still feeding the ducks, still wearing the same calm expression. To the world, he was the FBI director. But to himself, he was just a man trying to remind others. That respect should never depend on the color of your skin or the title you hold, and somewhere deep down. Even Officer Lewis learned something. Weeks later, he wrote a letter. Not to save his job, but to say he was sorry. Daniel never responded, but he read it twice, smiled faintly, and placed it in his drawer beside the badge his father once wore. A reminder that every uniform carries two choices: pride or humility sometimes. The loudest lesson in life comes not from power or punishment, but from dignity. In that day in the park, one man's calm changed another man's conscience forever. Because true authority isn't in how loud you speak. It's in how you choose to stay calm when the world expects you to shout. If you believe respect should never depend on race, rank, or title, make sure to subscribe. Because stories like this are meant to remind us all that humanity always comes first.